project a little bit. So this kind of serves two masters. It demonstrates how topography and battles kind of play out with strategy. Okay, but hopefully this will kind of pique your interest, or at least an awareness of how battles might play out, so that when you're doing your project and you're doing your battle map, like you'll kind of get a feel for it. What's that? You're still taking it, and I'm talking about something else. All right, so the Civil War, Battle of Antietam, it is maybe the best emblematic battle. Now, why is it that Antietam is so good? Yes?
The bloodiest single day battle.
Okay, bloodiest single day. And when you're trying to demonstrate a battle, it's helpful to do a single day because there's less movement in one day than there is in like 4. Yes?
It allowed for President Lincoln to release the emancipation.
Okay, and that's a big one. It changes the nature and the cause of the war. What else? Yes?
It's like a classic example of like infiltrating or like gathering intel from the other side.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that, but that is totally true. What else? Anything? It uses geography and the kind of normal technology in that way. There's no Gatling guns, there's no submarines, there's no Ironsides, but this was a good land battle. All right, now, this brings us to kind of why Antietam or why Sharpsburg. Sharpsburg is the town. It's the high ground that's right here where Lee is. Antietam is the stream. It's right here. Depending on which side you're on, you either name your battles after the closest town or the most dominant geographic feature. Now, I can't remember which one does what. One side says it's about the town, one side says it's about the geographic feature. I can't remember which. Anybody know that one? No? All right. Anyway, this is mostly known as the Battle of Antietam because it's named after this creek, Antietam Creek. Now, sets the stage for September 1862, early in the war. The North pretty much hasn't won any battles. Lee is eating their lunch like single-handedly. He can do, yes sir?
North is by like nearby rivers and streams, south is by nearby towns.
Okay.
Or
So we call it Antietam because the North won it, I guess.
Sometimes railroad junctions.
All right. Lee is eating their lunch. He can do more with less. He's very, very crafty. Now let's consider that for a second. If you are undefeated, if you're on a team that is undefeated, you've won every single game in the regular season, you get into the postseason, what are you thinking? Yeah, you're going to win it all, right? And you're going to play your next game with that kind of assumption. You're going to be throwing a bunch of threes where maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Lee does kind of the same thing. He has a great run, and it is based on brilliance, but he also thinks that it's based on divine intervention, right? God favors him and his cause, and he can't lose because he's done so much with so little. So Lee is going to go into another battle with that assumption, okay? The North, however, is desperate. They haven't won anything. They're getting, despite having more resources, money and people and everything, they still can't seem to come away with a win. And part of that is because their commanders, their generals, are inherently weaker than the generals on the South. Again, the South led by Lee. He's got great and immediate supporting cast. Longstreet might actually be the greatest tactician in all the war. He's undersung, but he is that brilliant. And then over here, we've got Stonewall Jackson, a freak of nature, actually, and but he is also amazing. Now, on the other side, you have people that went to West Point and that did well in school, but they aren't that good at leading an army. Chief among them is McClellan, who has the keys to the military. This is his second round as being the chief, like the biggest general. McClellan is an interesting cat because he's an incredibly good-looking general, right? Lee's good-looking. He's got this crazy white hair and these beautiful uniform, and his eyes are like fire blue. But McClellan is younger. He's got the best mustache in the military. He did well at West Point, and his men love him. He can hold a parade better than anybody, but he's inherently cautious. He is not very aggressive, like Lee is aggressive. Now, why is it that McClellan would be so popular with his troops that he would run for president in 1864, what about those characteristics make him popular?
He doesn't risk the lives of his
He doesn't risk their lives. He glorifies them in parades, but he doesn't risk their lives. And so his men love him, but Lincoln hates him. He's going to be fired twice. Okay? All right. Now, the North is hemorrhaging money. It's costing $1 million a day. And even though the North has more money than the South, that's still a lot of money. They got to raise taxes. They got to print money. They got to issue a bigger draft, and they've got to sell bonds. All of those things comes at a cost. You can't do that forever. And by the time you get into 1862, people are starting to be like, whoa, wait a second, what did we sign up for? This kind of sucks, right? The South, so they need to win something, because if you keep losing, people are going to be like, whatever, it's a terrible experience. The South, right, the South has been winning everything, but it's also come at a crazy cost. They're broke. They don't have an infinite amount of immigrants to fill their army with. They've got 66% inflation because they're just printing money. They're having to raise taxes, right? And they're enforcing laws that are kind of antithetical to what the Confederacy was supposed to be all about, right? The Confederacy is supposed to be about, no taxes, or if there is any tax, it's state tax, and it's about local autonomy. But to run a war, you can't run a war on that premise. And so they are in defiance of the very thing that they started about. Now, they need to end it fast. Yes?
How does printing money that fast work when you're working off a gold standard?
It diminishes the value of your gold.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, that's how the inflation happens, I guess. I mean, it seems like it would be pegged, but there are periods of time in which you say, yeah, gold standard's gold standard. And you just continue to print it. And people catch on to that, and then they're like, whatever.
Yes, it is. They just like as soon as they do that, like try and trade internationally, like before people realize that they're printing all this money.
That would be smart to do that, but I'm not sure that they do. Anyway, they need a win. They need it to be over. They need the North to be like, okay, to say that was a mistake. Now, Lee's going to take his army to Maryland, and he does it for specific reasons. If you've been fighting in Virginia the whole time for a year and a half, why would you then say, okay, let's go to Maryland instead? He is from Virginia. Right. Let's tear up some other place instead of this one. Virginia is reeling in pain when you have 2 or 3 or 4 armies in Virginia consuming all its resources and burning it to the ground. Then you need to relieve Virginia at some point. And so he wants to relieve Virginia and take the fight to the north. Yes?
Also by moving it, he probably wants to speed it up, like going through.
Exactly. Create a sense of desperation, right? And so by going into Maryland, where is the federal capital, by the way?
Richmond. And
No, the federal capital.
Oh, okay. Maryland.
Where is the U.S.? Yes, it's in Maryland. Washington, D.C. is in Maryland. And so you've got the Confederate Army within striking distance of Washington, D.C. That is a very disruptive concept. He's trying to hit a home, he's swinging for the stands, right? He's trying to hit a home run. He needs supplies, and the supplies are in the north, right? Also, Maryland is sympathetic to the Confederate cause. It wanted to be a Confederate state, but Abraham Lincoln made it a Union state. And he did it by putting people in jail, by forcing people to be part of the Union, by a number of things that were unsavory for sure. So Marylanders are sympathetic to the Confederate cause, and he knows that. Okay, so he's going to take it to Maryland. Now, when he gets to Maryland, I have a cool piece of paper somewhere. Describes what he did. Yes, I do. When he gets to Maryland, he issues a message to the people of Maryland. This is Robert E. Lee saying this. He says, to the people of Maryland, it is right that you should know the purpose that brought the army under my command within the limits of your state, so far as that purpose concerns yourselves. The people of the Confederate States have long watched with the deepest sympathy the wrongs and outrages that have been inflicted upon the citizens of a commonwealth allied to the states of the South by its strongest social and political commercial ties. So he's speaking to Maryland saying, look, Virginia and Maryland, we're basically the same thing. right? They have seen with profound indignation the sister state deprived of every right and reduced to the condition of a conquered province. He says the North has conquered you, and we feel for you, right? Under the pretense of supporting the Constitution, but in violation of its most valuable provisions, your citizens have been arrested and imprisoned upon no charge, and contrary to all forms of law. The faithful and manly protest against this outrage made by the venerable and illustrious Marylanders, to whom in better days no citizens appealed for right in vain, was treated with scorn and contempt. So he says, you've been wronged and I'm here to liberate you. Okay, so there are some Marylanders who would really like that message. I mean, there are a lot of Marylanders, people in Baltimore actually, who are throwing bricks at the Union Army. Okay, so there's a lot of sympathy for the Confederacy. And so he crafts a plan for some way of navigating Maryland. When he goes up there, and they're kind of playing cat and mouse, he is evading northern armies until he finds the place where he wants to fight. Okay? At some point, he crafts a plan. He plans to unite the armies of Virginia in one focused point where he can make a confrontation. Okay? He crafts that plan, wraps up his 3 cigars with that plan, leaves it in a box, right? And gets up and is gonna go do that plan. But he left the box underneath the tree. It was discovered by Union soldiers.
Oh.
They take it, they look at it, right?
Isn't it wrapped in cigars?
Yeah.
Like,
He wrapped,
yeah.
the cigars were wrapped in the plan.
Yes.
And then they verify it, and they're like, okay, is this a fake plan or is it a real plan? They establish that it's a real plan. They take it to McClellan, and McClellan is like, Eureka! I'm gonna make it happen! I'm finally gonna whip Bobby Lee! Right? And so he says to Lincoln, if I can't beat Lee here and now, then I will resign again from head of the army, right? And so he unifies his armies for this big conflagration, this big battle here at Antietam Creek. Now, here's how it's laid out. The big feature here is the creek, all right?
The water feature.
Yeah, the water feature. There is a bridge here, right? I don't have one there, but there is a bridge there. There is a bridge here, and then this is a feature called the sunken road. And we'll talk about why that's called that. This orange piece of paper here is an enormous cornfield, and I'm sorry it's not big enough to represent what it actually is. That this is Dunker Church. It's a small church on the battlefield. That the whole premise of the thing is like peace and nonviolence. And then over here we've got the East Wood, right? Pretty much. And then Sharpsburg is up here on the hill where Lee would be. Here's the cast of characters. You've got Lee here, kind of calling the shots from on top of the hill. You've got what's his name?
Stonewall Jackson.
Stonewall Jackson here. He is in charge of all of this going in this direction. Then you've got Longstreet here, and he's in charge of all of this in this direction. And so basically what they want to do is to pinch off and minimize the access points for the Union. Now, let's think about topography here, or the lay of the land, the geography. What do you know about how creeks shape the land?
They usually run in a valley.
They do. Actually,
Erosion.
every time they run in a valley,
Yeah.
they create valleys. And so the lowest point of the whole thing is along this creek. If you get to set up defensive positions on a hill, it is a massive advantage. If you get to shoot down on someone as they are trudging up a hill, it is hugely advantageous. Okay? There is a cliff here, even though I have no representation of that cliff, and it overlooks that bridge. There are like 300 or 400 Georgians who are pretty good at shooting, looking right down on that bridge. Okay? This bridge is defended by these guys, and the sunken road comes up from that bridge. It's called the sunken road because this dirt road is old. It's been around for a while. What do you know about dirt roads that have been around for a while? They erode. Water gets on them, and it creates almost like a creek bed, right? So they erode over time, and it creates a depression. Now this depression is a natural defense. It's sort of like a trench, right? You can lay in that road and shoot out of it, and it's a great position for these Confederate soldiers. Over here, the cornfield. What do we know about corn in September?
Is it ready to harvest?
It's ready to harvest.
Yeah.
which
It's
means
big,
it's like
tall.
8 feet high.
Oh yeah.
It's really high. And so it provides good cover, sort of, except it's not going to stop a bullet.
Yeah.
You can't see out of it, you can't see in it, but you can shoot through it.
Place to hide.
Woo.
Yeah. And so those are the major geographic features.
What's the
What you
nature
cannot
of the
see in the
enemy
back
shelter?
here, about where this wall is, maybe a little further beyond it, is the Potomac. And once you cross the Potomac, you're going back into Virginia and back home, back to safety. Okay? So the only escape is getting everybody making a laborious cross across the Potomac River. All right? Now, these guys are not really on the battlefield. They are, when the battle starts, about 17 miles away. Okay.
Just a quick jog.
Yeah, just a light walk. Number 3, what do you got?
Hooker engages in the north at 6 a.m., fighting in the cornfield, Savage, and by 7.
Okay,
there's
wait,
progress.
not too much. We're starting at 6.
Yes.
Okay, Hooker's over here, and he is going to engage his forces. He really is the guy kind of overseeing all of these other armies here. So these guys push forward into the cornfield, okay, and they are going to engage. Now, how long do you think you can effectively fight? That is, run, squat, shoot, reload, run, and all the time bullets going by.
10, 20 minutes.
10, 20 minutes? Maybe if you're a beast, you can do it for an hour. So these guys are going to go forward, and then they're going to go back and be, rest a little bit while another guy goes forward, and then they're going to kind of alternate going that way. You have to take breaks. Okay, it's really exhausting. All right, what happens at 7?
All right, by 7, there's progress. Hood counterattacks at bloody cost.
Okay, so there is counterattacking here. It's looking pretty ugly. Both sides taking substantial casualties. What's next?
Mansfield called out encounters. Blood and artillery cuts them down. Some troops make it to Dr. Church, no leaders.
Okay, so Mansfield gets all the way up here, okay? But these defenses on the high ground are really, really effective. Mansfield himself will go down, which leaves them somewhat leaderless. Now these guys are also taking casualties. It's bloody on both sides. But the advantage of setting up defenses ahead of time is really pretty profound. All right, next.
Sumner enters Westwoods and are cut down. Battle shifts south.
Okay, these guys are coming in this direction. They want to provide some degree of relief, but it's slow going, and it's really pretty ugly because the cornfield is being shot through, and this sunken road is a great defense structure.
Is this Charles Sumner?
No, different, but good association. What else you got?
Sumner attacks at Sunken Road. D.H. Hill awaits.
Okay, so D.H. Hill's guys are here. They are laying in the sunken road. These guys move forward, and it's really ugly. Now imagine you're hiding kind of in the trench there, and all you got to do is shoot at the guys coming at you, and you pretty much can't get shot. Okay?
Uh-oh.
So it's pretty rough for these guys as they move forward, and they're taking some pretty heavy casualties. What's next?
10:30 reinforcement come. Sunken Road retreat and bloodbath.
Okay, so these guys come forward, and then all of a sudden we get a perspective that looks a little more like that. Okay, now let's think about this and why that is a particularly bad thing.
Crossfire.
Right. You're laying in the trench. I'm laying in the trench, and I'm shooting this way, and it looks great, right? Until we get Ethan over here, who's like, oh, look, who is like laying in the trench right there, and he can just mow down people who are laying in that trench, right? And so this bloody lane, this sunken road, literally fills with bodies and blood, okay? It is a nightmare, okay? These guys fall hard, and they have to be reinforced by more people over here, okay? So the reinforcements come in, and they're barely holding the line. We got to take guys from over here in order to make that really happen. All right, what's next?
Small unit and artillery fire. Enter 1:30, 5,600 casualties at Bloody Lane.
Okay, 5,000 casualties on a road that's not a mile long. What do you got?
Lee's right flank. Burnside told to launch a divisionary attack, but attacks too late.
Okay, so Burnside is here, right? And if the way that you coordinate these battles is everything, the timing of it is everything. If this battle would have been going, reinforcements go over here. If Burnside would have acted sooner, he would have flanked the Confederacy and they would have been done. Like it might have been the end of the war done, right? But he waits and he waits and he waits because this bridge looks sketchy. What's wrong with crossing a bridge with your dudes?
You can't fire.
Could cave.
Well, the bridge could cave, but they're not worried about that.
Well,
It's
there's
a
looking at it.
It's a bottleneck, right? You're gonna go like 3 or 4 in a row, and you're gonna get mowed down, and then they're gonna go, and they're gonna get mowed down. So eventually, he summons his courage, and they're able to start crossing. Now what do you got?
400 Georgians have the high ground. Third try at 1 p.m. Union crosses on one bridge.
Okay, third try and 1 p.m., and that's like 3 hours too late, right? They begin to cross, and they're being kind of held down by the Georgians, but now the Union is amassing its forces here on this side, right? And if they gain traction here, they're going to be able to come around here and crush the Confederacy. All right, what's next?
It takes 2 hours to get 10,000 across. 4 p.m. AP Hill's men show up at the key point hitting Green troops.
Okay, from 17 miles away, right? AP Hill's troops show up right on time to repel Burnside and his boys, right? That therefore negates his movement right as they were about to go over there and end the battle. AP Hill and his forces stop Burnside and essentially make it so that they make no progress at all. Okay? So we're kind of blocked in this bloody stalemate on both sides. Now what do you got?
12 hours. Next day, McClellan does not attack. Defense capital did not want to pursue and crush.
Okay, so McClellan at like dusk, everybody's like, okay, dinner time's time to take a break, and they all go back. Why not fight at night?
You can't see.
Yeah, you can't see, so
Shoot your own
Shoot
arrow.
your
yeah,
own arrow.
you don't want friendly fire. That's the worst thing, right? And in fact, Stonewall Jackson would be killed by friendly fire, right? It's a terrible, terrible tragedy. Anyway, they both retreat to their respective sides, each side of the Antietam Creek. The next day at around noon, Lee is like, okay, I've had enough. And he starts to pull all his forces back across the Potomac and back into the South. McClellan, who had numerical superiority and more resources and had these guys on the ropes, does not pursue them and lets them retreat. He could have crushed the Confederate army right there, but he chose not to, right? And it was like a pivotal moment, really. War could have been over. Now, Lincoln would come to the battlefield and he would survey it, and he would say, pursue, dadgummit, go get them. And McClellan straight up refuses to do that. And so he'll be fired for a second time as a result. But the Union would claim a victory, all in all, and it was enough. Now, it is emblematic because it's the bloodiest single day of the Civil War. There were something like 4,000 people killed in this battle, and then the casualty numbers were, what, like 15,000 or something like that. It was a huge number, which is the worst number we would ever see. But it's enough to claim a victory, and it's enough to justify emancipation. You cannot say, I issued the Emancipation Proclamation after a resounding defeat. You have to do it on kind of a surge of enthusiasm. And so by doing that, he would change the nature of the war. If it was about reunification and bringing those Confederates back to the Union, now it's about something different, right? It's about freedom, and it's about humanity, it's about morality, and it inspires people in a different way. Now, it doesn't erase the race problem in the North, but it does make people fight for something that's much, much bigger than them, that they can point their finger at and say, you know what, I feel good about dying for that. And so the number of people that flood to that will increase. Another thing that it does is it makes it so that Great Britain doesn't want any part of the South anymore. Now, why would the Emancipation Proclamation ruin cotton diplomacy?
Because it lost its claim of force.
Yeah, without slaves.
Well, it still had its labor force, but now Britain is going to feel a little, I don't know, squishy about it. The people of Great Britain has already emancipated their slaves. And now that it's about emancipation and freedom, the workers of Great Britain are like, we don't want any part of the South. I understand that my job is connected to cotton, but I will not support the South in this. They are wrong. And so Britain, who was trying to issue or do some backdoor deals with the South, is going to totally pull out of those negotiations and will not have anything to do with them. So now the South is on their own as a result of that. And there's a new cause. Now, speaking of cause, we see the changes over time. There are several kinds of changes. One such change was at the beginning of 1862 when a woman, Julia Ward Howe, is touring a Union camp. She is a daughter of a wealthy banker in the North, and she's walking around the campfires and the camp and all that, and she's inspired by what she saw. She goes to bed that night, and she's a deeply religious person, and she has this vivid dream where the words to a poem come to her, as if by some sort of miracle, right? She goes to her minister, and she tells her minister like exactly what she saw, and he is inspired as well. He's like, Julia, you have to circulate this, right? And so she does. She sells her poem to a newspaper for $5, right? And this poem lights a fire within the United States, and people are like, yeah, that's amazing. And so she takes her poem and she puts the words to her poem to a popular tune in the day, right? And that tune that everybody in the North knew was John Brown's Body.
Yep.
You guys remember John Brown? The crazy guy that killed the people in Kansas?
Yep.
And then that had the Harper's Ferry raid? John Brown's Body was the most popular song, and it went like this. John Brown's body lies a-molding in the grave. And then it goes on, it's a bunch of really grim stuff. But it's about him being a martyr, right? And everybody loves it, and they sing it all the time. Does that tune sound familiar to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so they take that tune, that catchy song, and they apply this new poem to it, and it goes like this. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. He is trampling out the vintage where the grapes of wrath are stored. He hath loosed the fateful lightning from his terrible lance with sword. His truth is marching on. You ever heard that before?
Yeah.
Have you heard that? What is
Yes.
that?
Glory, glory, hallelujah. Yeah.
It's the battle hymn of the Republic. Like the very thing that moves our armies today was created in that moment by some sort of divine intervention.
It was a sign from God.
Right. And so it makes it so that the
Yes.
South isn't the only group like doing this for God's sake. They're not the only ones supported by God. Now God's swift and terrible sword is on the side of the Union. And everyone is empowered by it and is an angry, vengeful God that is willing to stomp things out and create pathways of blood. It's all justified because God supports it. All right, we will leave it.